Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Allison Dale, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hello. I welcome you to Cycles of Time weekly forecast for July 29th to August 4th, Monday through Sunday. Working our way through Leo season, and I'm calling this episode Retreating into the Field of Possibility. And listen more to see why. So what a frenzy it's been lately, huh? I'd say the sun's entrance into Leo and her transit last week through the gates of stimulation and influence were pretty spot on. And they felt like a dramatic shift from Cancer season's kind of like inward navel gazing. Last week and the week before, so much has happened on the world stage, and there's been so much change, and breaking news continues to spring up every day. I do breaking news with air quotes because it seems like everything is breaking news these days. So yeah, there's definitely a lot going on. Very aware of it. It's like impossible not to be. You'd have to be hiding under a rock. And it's just things are churning. I feel like there's a palpable energy in the collective air right now. And some are calling it hope, and others are calling it distraction. But it's definitely certain that the stagnancy of the midsummer heat that we talked about around the solstice has cleared and something new is on the horizon. I really felt like it went from this point of kind of like people just feeling like gotta hunker down and just push on through to having the pot stirred up. And of course, I'm talking about U.S. politics here, as they are pervasive in the mimetic social culture and just the world, everything. There's just a lot of energy there. But in my personal life and a lot of people's lives that personally that I've talked to lately, it's also feeling like we went from, solstice was just a couple weeks ago, and it felt like at that point there was a heaviness in the air. And now as we move past that point and the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer, there's more like imaginal realm activation when the nights start getting longer. And I think as we dig into the end of Cancer season, the beginning of Leo season, there's this really radical shift that happens. I think between any zodiac signs, there's always going to be a bit of a like, oh, well, that feels different than it did before. But a lot of people, I think, would say that Cancer to Leo feels like kind of the most shocking, like just very, very different energies. And I do think it's because it's like, we're really starting to lean into the longer nights. You know, the cat, the Leo, the lion is a nocturnal animal, and we're starting to see clearer in the dark, right? And there's just more imagination that happens as we start to kind of think about fall, think about the air getting a little bit crisper, but we're still in the like dripping luxury of summer season. So that's how I feel. Definitely energy shift. And I'm curious how y'all feel and how last week's gates showed up for you. Stimulation and influence. And I'm not exactly sure what all of this change, all of this stirring of the pot will bring. And I'm definitely loving all of my astrology friends and colleagues right now who are releasing, like, who are just viscerally mind blown by the astrological correlations with the, mundane political events that are happening. Because it's pretty fascinating when you have a collective of people tuned into some transits, and then you have a collective of people hyper tuned into details of what's happening on the world stage minute by minute. And compared to old times in history before the internet, we don't have to wait to receive confirmation that something has happened or that a transit played out in a certain way, because we have everything happening and being reported in instantaneous real time. So it's this moment of like this astrology community and these predictions and forecasts kind of meeting head on with current events. And the Trump assassination attempt corresponded with the Mars-Uranus conjunction. And from that point on, which was when I was at breath camp, and from that point on, it's just been like bing, 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 oh my God, and this and that, and look at that chart. And yeah, I think it's really fascinating and really cool. And there's a lot of predictions swirling around in the divination communities that are like, oh yeah, this is what's going to happen with the presidential election. This is who's going to win. And I really enjoy reading them, but I also really start to notice when I get a certain addictive quality to either the news or to astrology or to whatever the mental thing is that's happening, that's playing out, that I'm scrolling through or staying up late, addictively needing more information about. I really, over the past several years, have, with my breath practice and my embodiment practices, and just really giving a lot more weight to the wisdom of my body, I've started to let that take precedent over my mental patterns of needing more. And so I'll make myself, put the phone down, turn the news off, stop reading the astrology, because ultimately predictions are just predictions, and it's really fun when they match up. It's just like, haha, I told you so. Yes, we live in this cyclical patterned time, and I can relate this to a time in history that was similar to now. And it's it does something. It's talk about a dopamine hit. It's that serendipity or that kind of connection point where you just get this mega surge of dopamine because there's been a connection between things. And so go for that. If that's what's floating your boat and you're enjoying seeing the world through that lens, astrologers that are listening out there, astrology fans, by all means, lean in. But just remember that there's also a very personal, embodied way to use these tools like astrology or the I Ching or human design or all of these cyclical practices that allow us to, yes, tap in deeper to historical cycles. And, Richard Tarnas's book, Cosmos and Psyche, is one example of a astrology book that goes into the history of humankind and especially the past, couple thousand years, and looks at how big outer planet transits, Pluto and Saturn and Uranus conjunctions and oppositions, have all highlighted certain things in political history with wars and with uprisings and revolutions and super fascinating stuff. And so it's a very cool branch of astrology. And also that's the macro seasons that are fun to tap into. And then there's the micro seasons. And I've used this term quite a lot lately in my social media, maybe not as much on the podcast, but micro seasons is something that I have been thinking about a lot, and it's why I'm really enjoying the I Ching and human design and these gate-focused podcast on a week-by-week basis, because it's tapping into, a few days of a certain energy, and that's really like as much as our bodies can handle as far as like actionable, what we can do with a prediction. So we have a prediction that's in November, for instance, or a prediction that's playing out, 2027 or 2054 or whatever it is. And we have like this idea that might happen. But as far as our day-to-day lived experience, if you zoom out too much further than a week or a month, you could get lost in what's supposed to be and what is. And with just a few days of, let's focus on this energy right now. Let's think about stimulation this week. Let's think about influence for these 5 days and what that means to me and how that can parlay into the larger cycles, but not getting kind of lost in the frenzy of the larger cycles, right? So, the macrocosm, the microcosm, the macro seasons and the micro seasons. I think that right now, as far as the revolution is concerned, for me, it's about the micro seasons to a point where I feel them in my body. I feel connected to the changes that are happening and feel like I can surf the waves a little bit. And then maybe I'll be able to zoom a little bit further out. But I think for a lot of us as emotional beings and beings who do ride waves all the time of collective emotion, it's really important to recognize how quickly things change and not get too caught up in the righteousness of a prediction or the righteousness of what we just know for certain is going to happen, and to allow space for this nocturnal wisdom, the dreamlike energy, the sharpening of night vision into thinking about, how do we personally, as these embodied beings, deal with larger cycles of society and culture. So, a quote that I love to remember in times like this that feel so pressing and so overwhelming is an African proverb that's been popularized again by the great Bayo Akomolafe, a big fan of his work. And it says, "Times are urgent, let's slow down." I've probably mentioned this quote before. I just think it's brilliant and almost contradictory, but that's what's so great about it, is it's like slowing down is super important. And another quote that always comes back, and I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but whenever I feel uncertainty, like a rush of uncertainty in like a wave of all the social and media conditioning and just the collective consciousness, I think of the amazing Octavia Butler, who wrote in her novel Parable of the Sower, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change." And the novel that this was the first page of, this was a quote, kind of a preamble to the first chapter, was 1993's predictive sci-fi novel Parable of the Sower. And it began with a journal entry from the protagonist that was dated to July 20th, 2024. And that date was just about a week ago. And many fans of her work over the past week pointed that out and, screenshotted the picture of the book that showed July 20th, 2024. And it just feels kind of uncanny as we seem to get closer and closer to the political gradual dystopia that's presented in the novel, but also closer to this conscious, they call it a religion. It's called Earthseed, but it's not really a religion. It's just this belief system that is about the only lasting truth is change and remaining adaptable. And I just love the increasing popularity of these tenets, both the times are urgent, let's slow down, and the God is change tenets. I see them more and more everywhere. And I think that they're philosophies about slowing down and about recognizing change in our world and in our bodies as important in these modern times. And they don't seem like they should be radical, right? They're kind of like the most obvious things, but because of that, they are the most radical. And for me, this podcast, Cycles of Time, is really all about that too. It's about the radical nature of the simplicity in such overly complicated times. Like when your brain starts spinning out and being like, I can see that side, and oh my God, but also this, but what do we have to do? And also there's this other thing that just came in the mix and more data, and somebody else said this. And so like, how do I weave that into my worldview? And it's like, it's just so overwhelming and exhausting to be able to live in that. And so I think just recognizing that, yeah, it's important. Like the revolution cannot be rushed, and it's about finding home, finding groundedness within ourselves to meet it where it needs to be met. This week, the sun is transiting through the I Ching and Human Design gate of retreat, gate 33, and it's all about this, what I'm talking about here, about retreating from the day-to-day, the frenzy, the fray, the busyness for just a little while, not forever, not too long so that you forget what's going on, but just long enough to recognize the inherent interconnectedness and wholeness of everything, and to recognize that God is change, and that when times are urgent, we need to not chase answers, but to slow down. My friend Kendra Bloom, who's a psychotherapist, recently posted a video on her Instagram about a theme that's been coming up for many of her clients lately and on the world stage. And I'm going to quote her here. I will put a link in the show notes to her work and her profile. But I just thought what she said was super on point for this gate and just super profound, really. Just stilling this gate of retreat where we are now. And so she says that zooming out, this moment is about the request to break with the old, to allow ourselves to be transformed in some way. There's a breaking down of the assumptions and the investments in the old way. The phrase that I find myself saying to people right now is wildly responsive and fiercely surrendered. Instead of walking into the rigid, fear-based, mind-oriented and brain-oriented ways of doing things, those of us who can find ourselves in this moment and allow the big questions that so many folks are trying to answer in their lives right now to be an emergent process. Fiercely surrendered means it takes so much bravery to allow ourselves to be informed by something greater. The wild responsive is this radical step toward, I'm actually just going to listen and honor, instead of just using the brain, to start using the consciousness that comes from using our body and the Earth's larger body, along with the consciousness of our hearts and intuition as they connect with the larger matrix of energy. She says, it's just an invitation right now to really slow down and ask, is there a place in my life that could be nurtured by surrendering, by allowing myself the time, the space, and the trust to listen instead of just do, and instead of relying on old systems and patterns, to start to repattern based on being informed by whatever the wisdom is that is arising, by what's really coming in the moment, to let your life show you what's here and what's not here. She ends her video with a prompt that it's time to make a choice, to ask ourselves, am I more interested in the field of possibility, or am I more interested in the fears of my past? And where do I want to place my energy and my attention, which are really the only thing we have control over? So welcome to Gate 33. this week, retreating into the field of possibility. This week's highlights are, starting today, Monday, the sun is still in the gate of influence. And from Tuesday through Sunday, the sun will be in gate 33, the gate of retreat. And there's also a new moon in Leo on Sunday, on the last day of that gate this week. And so it's those energies align, planting seeds within that place of retreating into possibilities. The week's themes are to retreat and regroup and recalibrate and reevaluate everything. We are almost hitting a Mercury retrograde, which will be the next Monday. But we're in the Mercury retrograde shadow period. And so all of these re's, like reconsider, recalibrate, regroup, retreat, these are all things that are going to continue onward through Mercury retrograde, because that's a period where our mental realm, that is symbolized by Mercury, things start to go haywire perhaps, but it's really just an opportunity to reevaluate and regroup and take a little break. So this is a little precursor to that, a distinct week of retreat. And it's a week of personal sovereignty, really owned by that Leo new moon, and connecting with your own idea of heaven. The elements of the hexagram of the Gate of Retreat are heaven over mountain, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but it's really kind of like heaven. For me, growing up, that word was always like too associated with the Christian biblical notion of heaven. But obviously in the ancient Chinese I Ching, that was a very different concept. And so just thinking as I speak about heaven and words that come up in this episode, to consider them as your own view of that. So that is one of the themes for the week. We continue through the medicine wheel direction of south, fire and youth. The whooshing cycle of fire continues as we edge our way into the earth season of late summer. The zodiac season Leo continues until August 22nd, and we have a new moon in Leo August 4th. So jumping into the gate of the week, 33, a little bit deeper here, retreat is heaven over mountain. And looking at the hexagram in the I Ching, it is 4 solid lines above 2 yin broken lines. And I always post images of these hexagrams in the astrosomatics.substack.com, just to give a visual representation of the elemental nature of these hexagrams and these gates. So heaven over mountain looks kind of like a cave within a mountain, like it's these big solid lines above and then like a little hole down at the bottom. So it looks kind of like, when you look at the visual of the hexagram, it looks like a kind of a perfect place to retreat for a little bit and regroup into that cave. You could also see it as a tall, solid mountain, perfect for a little trip up to the top to sit and gaze at the heavens above. There's a lot of solid young energy at the top of the hexagram that will hold someone who's wanting to make a pilgrimage to the top of that mountain. So either in the cave or up on top of the mountain, it's about retreating away from the frenzy and fray. With this week's energy, after the past week's energy of traveling about and then influencing the community and kind of having a democratic process, this week's about retiring to your own personal sovereignty and connecting with the heavens above and regrouping before moving back out into the world and moving on into more leadership of Leo season. Creating enough distance from the external frenzy, especially in these excessively media-saturated times, is key to tune into what you really think and feel without constant feedback from others. Retreat here has the sense of retreating into something bigger, submerging and surrendering and hiding yourself within the larger the greater realm, like someone on top of a mountain might feel that the heavens were encompassing them. Like if you've ever hiked up a mountain and been in that like misty sunset experience where the sky just turns pink and orange around you and you're just kind of eaten up by it. There's nothing that can describe that feeling. I hiked up to a bat cave with my daughter the other day and mentioned it in a couple episodes ago, but it was that kind of feeling of like trudging along, like, are we ever going to make it up here? She's not the best hiker. She's 5, but like getting to the top right around the time when the sky was just transforming and just morphing and becoming alive with color was just like, oh yeah, here I am. And that is something. It's truly something bigger. In the I Ching, there's a quote that says, "Below heaven is the mountain. Retreat. A noble one keeps small people at a distance, not with hatred, but through respect." The great sages throughout history have guided us to look within ourselves for the kingdom of heaven. And I think that this is all about looking within ourselves and looking up to the skies and the greater, larger picture. And like Kendra said in the quote, the field of possibility is this wisdom that is emergent and is that arising and is coming from our bodies and is coming from our intuition and our hearts and the world around us, and not our constantly rattling minds that are trying to solve problems all the time. So that's something to really keep in mind this week as we retreat. In the Gene Keys, the interpretation of this gate 33 really hits this looking within toward the kingdom of heaven on the head. And in its shadow form of the Gene Keys, gate 33 is the shadow of forgetting. And that's kind of forgetting your true nature and retreating from yourself, or also retreating for so long that there's nothing to bring back into the next cycle. That it's retreating for the sake of retreating and not for the sake of gaining wholeness and clarity. And then in the Gene Keys, the gift level is mindfulness, which is attuning to your subconscious patterns, objectively viewing your thoughts, and retreating inward to listen to yourself. And again, it's just funny because I had written this and then I watched this video by Kendra. And so just big shout out to you, Kendra, if you're listening, because it just, everything that showed up with what you were saying feels so spot on when considering this, like the subconscious patterns we have, patterns of fear, patterns of our past, are definitely something that we can choose to pay attention to or not. But if we attune to them and we listen to ourselves, but also listen while we're up high above on the mountain looking up at the heavens, and we allow ourselves to attune to new patterning that comes from different sources of greater wisdom. That's what this gift level is all about. And I like to think of the Gene Keys shadow, gift, and city levels in a organic way, which would be like the shadow is the seed, the gift is the flower, and then the city is like the pollen. It's when it becomes kind of like enlightened and transformed and kind of sporulates out into the world. So the city level of gate 33, Gene Key 33, is revelation. So we go from forgetting to mindfulness to revelation. And with revelation, illusion is cracked around the edges, and there is an ego death. And the retreat is not retreating inward to yourself or retreating away from yourself or the world, but the retreat is from the attachment to a false self, and from the attachment to the world, and from the attachment to time itself. This siddhi level is like the pollinating connection to heaven and to infinity, and recognizing that we are all one part of a greater whole, and all of the divisions are the bullshit. All of the divisions are purposefully put there to distract us and to cultivate us into what powers that be want us to be. But the retreat into ourselves, especially as we connect with nature and cycles and the wholeness, is just like, oh, whoa, poof. There is no, we are so attached to notions of division and binary codes in our lives, but it's really just infinity. Richard Rudd in 64 Ways says, "This gift can turn the whole of our life into a blaze of presence and peacefulness. Retreat does not have to be something we do after we've been in action. The retreat can be the action itself. That is a gift from heaven." Yeah, I like to think about that, because I'm thinking about how oftentimes the only time people like deserve a vacation or like give themselves a retreat or like need a break is when they are so burnt out that by the time they get to that break point, they just have to crash or sleep or not be aware. Like it's an unconscious retreat, which isn't really what we're talking about here. This is more like retreat before you're burnt out. Like actually give yourself permission to like take a beat, take a pause before it's like so necessary. It's like remembering to breathe in and out continuously without like holding your breath and then being like gasping for air. It's like, obviously that's not a great way to breathe, but oftentimes we do that. We really, really do. So yeah, how will you find revelation if you're passed out? It's not going to happen. I was listening to the Gene Keys on Spotify audiobook, which is free with a premium subscription. So if you want to dig deeper into this, I recommend doing so. It's always very beautiful, flowery verbiage and great concepts through that language. I'm going to share a list on my website when I release it, which is coming soon, of like all of the different resources that I use on a weekly basis for Gene Keys human design, astrology, I Ching. There's a lot of really great websites that over time I've kind of honed into, and books and resources that are like provide just really beautifully information to each of these systems. So here I do the synthesis and I weave them together as much as possible, but I think that if you want to go deeper into one or another, I will provide this resource. But anyway, in the Gene Keys audio, it was talking about the myth of the Great Flood, which is a deep symbol, not just in Christianity, but within the human psyche. There's this concept of a great flood that happened in ancient times. And to Richard Rudd, who wrote the Gene Keys and contemplated them, he says that the Great Flood represents revelation. He says that after the flood, there's always a sign, a dove or a rainbow, or a symbol of a new world, a sign of revelation. And that the flood itself is a memory of our own future. It's a testament that one day we will be washed clean by the overwhelming tsunami of consciousness. Your existence as a separate, individualized creature will one day end. Revelation brings an end to endings. It ends all myths, it ends the world, and it dissolves time itself. In the Gene Keys, 33 is associated with a genetic stop codon, along with gates 12 and 56. And I'm not going to go too far into that, but the Gene Keys kind of takes these I Ching gates and the human design system and applies them to the 64 code bases in DNA and the Gene Keys, and has a genetic component. And so the stop codon in the genetic sequence, every stop codon precedes another strand of DNA. And so it's talking about how true revelations always end certain times and reveal the hidden secrets or prophecies of a new era. And so this gate, it kind of accelerates the evolution of human consciousness by stopping. Just full stop, pause, put it on hold, take a beat, go to the top of the mountain, connect with heaven, zoom out a little bit, like get out of the minutia. And through that, we can kind of see prophecies of a new time. And so the predictions based on the past are one thing, and they might be true. The past does tend to repeat itself, and we gotta, look at history to not repeat our mistakes. I do believe in that fiercely, but also so much has changed. We have so much more, so many more systems feeding each other and accelerating each other now than just simply looking at the past. Like, the cycles of time are not a cycle that's like the same every year. You look at the wheel of the year, and hopefully by the next spring equinox, when the next cycle of this podcast happens, I will have learned something that I can apply to the next cycle in a spiralic way. So it's not like spinning on its axis and just like, spinning its wheels in the mud, but it's actually moving along through space and progressing in that secular way. And so that's what's happening here. But recognizing endpoints and beginning points is a huge function of thinking about rites of passage and ritual, like the days and the weeks within this ongoing larger cycle and spiral. We have to have stops. We have to have ends. We have to have beginnings that, even if we've artificially cultivated them, or we like mark them based on some arbitrary thing, it's still really important to do that. And that's why I love holidays, and I love birthdays, and I love looking back on old pictures to what I was doing on exactly this day, X number of years ago. Like, there's something to that, like, passage of time of like, oh my God, that is exactly the same, but also so different. Like, I am a whole different person now. So one other quote from the Gene Keys that I want to read is I really liked, and it says that every individual goes through a progression of revelations until they reach the ultimate revelation, that consciousness within form has a storyline to follow. The trick is to fall in love with your own story and follow it without holding anything back. Two things are then assured. Firstly, you will arrive at the end of the story. And secondly, your own story will be utterly unique and unlike anyone else's. So I just loved that. I love that we're like constantly going through our own personal revelations, and then recognizing that like maybe there isn't one big revelation that like it's achieving that capital T truth, but that you're following this storyline of learning from the stops and starts within a cycle, and that if you really own that and own your own learnings throughout this and own your own growth and your growth relationally with the earth and with the sky and with other people and other beings, that is where you can really know that you will find that end at the end of the day, because you've dedicated yourself to your own storyline, and that you will have a badass and unique storyline that is only yours. I really like that. So, it's rare to attain the states of revelation, this kind of enlightenment, like big aha moment. And I think it's rare because there's no one to follow. It's impossible to hear other people's story of reaching revelation or enlightenment because it's not your story. So you can't relate to it. And it's truly about your own story. And so, as you stop to pause this week, what it's really about is like the inner wisdom, the wisdom of the universal collective of everyone and everything, but not comparing yourself to somebody else's story or being like, oh, that guy reached enlightenment through X, Y, or Z, got to the top of this mountain. Like, why don't I feel anything? It's because it's like you can't hear it and then do it. It has to come from within and from the larger heavens, right? So cool stuff. I get kind of shivers thinking about this stuff. It's just a lot funner to think about and to feel into than what my mind has been occupied with, which have been the Kamala Gen Z memes about coconuts and Taylor Swift and Beyonce and like cool stuff, but I don't even get it. It's making me feel old, guys. Like I'm just like, good, go youth, vote. Do youth, but I'm also like, holy shit, it all makes no sense. And I go on TikTok and I'm like, what is happening? But I like that it's happening. So anyway, this for me is my T Swift right here. Cycles of time. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I want to let you go. But Sunday is a new moon in Leo. And we talked a lot about Leo last week, and I also sent out a full article about Leo season to my subscribers at Astrosomatics. You can subscribe for free at astrosomatics.substack.com to get this and other gems in your inbox every week. But the new moon in Leo is just tying into the gate of retreat. It is, I talk a lot about Leos being radiant and shining leaders who take the center stage and they're the center of attention. So having retreat as the gate for this part of Leo season and for this Leo new moon could seem a little bit like, But as I've described a little bit, Leos do retreat a lot, I think. And I think it makes a lot of sense. The sun is Leo's ruler, and like the sun has a natural gravitational pull to it, all the planets orbit around it. It doesn't ask the planets to orbit it, right? And the lion, as an animal symbol, also has a kind of natural gravity by being like so like the way they look in their roars and taking up a lot of space, but they don't necessarily like enjoy being the center of attention. There's a lot of actually I'd rather not, like just leave me alone kind of vibes. And so that's kind of a misperception about Leos sometimes, but I'd say that oftentimes because of their nature, they're just put out there, and they're out on display. And so they have to respond to all of the animals in the kingdom that surround them, everyone around Pride Rock. But I think that's why having a cave, a lion's den or a cave, or a mountaintop, Pride Rock, to retreat to is very essential for the lion. And so on this new moon, make retreat the action itself. If you do it before you're burnt out or before you're running through the hills or gasping for air, you can think of retreat as a respectful process of filling your cup so that you can pour from it when you return back into the frenzy of the animal kingdom. And with that, I will say farewell and enjoy your week of retreat. I may or may not post on social media about this, and so may or may not get listens, but I'm ready to, really take my own advice again, understand the assignment, and connect with myself and with the unification of the larger world. And I hope that you take some time to do the same, even if just an hour, or you take the long road home, like when you're driving home, just a little time to be with yourself. So have a beautiful week of retreat, and remember to like, share, and follow, and comment, and all the things if you would be so kind. And I will see you next week. All the love.